start. So I'd like to welcome forward, we're going to do item 18, Age-Friendly Auckland Annual Report. Joanna, Maxine and Dr. Claire Dale. Yes? Yes. Thank you very much. We can expect more councillors to be filtering into the room, but we do have councillors online. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, ko Joanna Maskell tōku ingoa. I'm a Principal Policy Advisor with Community and Social Policy, and I'm here to present the first annual progress report for Tāmaki Makaurau Tau Awhi Kaumātua Mahiri Mahi, the Age-Friendly Auckland Action Plan. Sitting next to me is Maxine Styling, the chairperson of Whakamana Ki Te Ao, the Age-Friendly Auckland Implementation Rōpū, and she'll be joining me in the presentation to speak about the work of the implementation rōpū. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Claire Dale, who you met earlier today, the co-chair of the Auckland Council Seniors Advisory Panel, who are the kaitiaki of this plan, and of course, Senior Policy Manager Liz Civil. Let's move to the next slide. So, the Age-Friendly Auckland Action Plan is a region-wide cross-sector plan to improve the well-being of older Aucklanders. It was developed after engagement with over 5,000 Aucklanders of all ages and backgrounds, and it sets out Council's commitment to create a region that supports the well-being of older people. The action plan is based on the WHO Age-Friendly Framework and also the Te Whare Tapawhā Māori Wellbeing Model. There are the 10 domain areas that you can see there that provide direction for Council, CCOs and age sector organisations to deliver improved wellbeing outcomes for older Aucklanders. The plan was adopted by the governing body in November 2021. I'll now hand over to the chair of the Age-Friendly Implementation Rōpū to speak briefly about the work of the rōpū.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Maxine Styling and I'm the Tenancy Quality Manager for Homaru Housing, which is affordable housing for independent living for the over 65 community around the Auckland area. And I've been doing this position for 2.5 years. I became the chair of Te Rōpū Whakamana Ki Te Ao 10 months ago. And I've enjoyed absolutely every minute of it. This has been one of my best decisions I have ever made. Age-Friendly Auckland is unique. It's a cross-sector plan with age sector community organisations and government responsible for delivering actions as well as council. It was agreed that there needed to be a cross-agency implementation group to have leadership and oversight of the action plan in question. Te Rōpū was established in 2022 to facilitate information sharing and learnings as well as to enable collaboration and collective action. This became very evident when we were in Cyclone Gabrielle and the responses that we took to support one another from within the rōpū. Te Rōpū comprises of representatives from across the council whānau and diverse representatives of the aged care sector. As a rōpū, we've worked together and supported Auckland Council to become a member of the World Health Organisation Age-Friendly Network and Cities and Communities in 2022 that I'm extremely proud of. Te Rōpū also organised its inaugural age-friendly symposium that was extremely successful. It was lovely to see over 130 people there that day that absolutely enjoyed every minute, and the feedback was fantastic. In 2023, we reflected on how the symposium had gone and how to keep up the progress and momentum with the plan. Therefore, we decided to go ahead with face-to-face HUIs because it was much better to get people in a room and be able to discuss over a cup of tea and a piece of cake how we were going to move forward and collaborate with each other. And it was one of the most effective things we've done. In celebration of this year, we've had 3 successful events, one with the Health and Disability Commission, Caroline Cooper, to help provide feedback about priorities for the Aged Care Commissioner. The second one was around AT, and the options for the older Aucklanders, which included discussions around total mobility cards and also extra accessibility issues that they found. And finally, on the housing option for older people, which I was very happy to hold in Otara Court. And there was over 40 people there that day for the meeting, and they came for morning tea, which was great. So we're now organising, and in the process of organising, our second age-friendly Auckland Symposium to bring together people, government and age sector together on the 1st of November of this year. And Carolyn Cooper will be our main speaker, and we've got a panel of older Aucklanders in the afternoon that will be doing question and answer sessions, and I'm really pleased to be chair. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Maxine. So I'll now move into a brief overview of the findings and recommendations from the annual report. Under the 10 domains of the action plan, we have 106 actions. 46 of those actions are delivered by NGOs and government, with 60 being delivered by council whānau. Staff undertook surveys and interviews with all of those action holders to hear about the progress, and the results show that at least 70% of the actions are underway and progressing well. This slide gives a more detailed breakdown of where the progress is occurring. The most progress has been made in the domains of respect and social inclusion and communication and information. There's less progress that has been made in housing and te tau, the natural and built environment. The report highlights some of the notable successes. In particular, there are 5 case studies in Attachment A to the annual report, highlighting some of the great work that has happened across the region. Those include the Digital Seniors Pilot, which was supported by 3 local boards on the North Shore, the building of kaumātua housing at the Papakura Marae, supported by the Papakura Local Board, research in a partnership between Haumaru Housing and Auckland University around the optimum temperatures for older people living in their Wilshire Village apartment, and the success of Age Concerned Social Connector model, helping older people access companionship and social support across Tāmaki. There's also been some great work across the council whānau, including AT's introduction of the +1 bus scheme, which allows people who require a support person to travel on a bus, for that person to travel for free, and some great work in our local boards, including the Māngere Otahuhu Local Board, who've developed their own age-friendly plan, and the Manurewa Local Board, who've developed an age-friendly services directory. So there's more of that information in the annual report. So through the work of Te Rōpū and our surveys and interviews, we had some key lessons that we've detailed in the annual report. Relationships and connections are really critical to driving the success of this plan. The value that's created from those relationships was evident in the way that the Rōpū members were able to work together to support older Aucklanders during the extreme weather events we had recently. And we support continuing to build those connections in the sector. And that will be an ongoing role for Te Rōpū, but we also acknowledge that a dedicated resource to support greater sector connection and collaboration would be useful. Keeping the connections is really important for creating opportunities for sector partnership and collective action as well. Doing this well is time and resource intensive, so exploring how this can be done more effectively will be valuable. Council, government and sector relationships could also be strengthened to progress the action plan. And again, that was a key finding from our partners in response to the recent extreme weather events. And finally, we found that more specific and measurable actions will make the monitoring of this plan easier and more effective. Actions in the plan were developed by council teams and age sector partners at the time and included a mix of ongoing business as usual as well as some new initiatives. So a consideration for the future would be having fewer but more specific strategic and measurable actions, and we can look at that as part of the 3-year review of this plan, which will come up at the end of next year. So In terms of our next steps and recommendations, just to share the findings with the relevant parties, including the Auckland Emergency Management and Flood Recovery Office around those specific findings about supporting older people, investigating best practice flood preparedness for older people. We know that some of the regional councils around New Zealand have also done some work in this area, and to investigate whether there's the potential to secure more resources to support the sector by talking to our central government partners. So that's all that I have in terms of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions about the report.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you too. Maxine, you gave some really good examples of participative democracy and how we can work with partners like you to make that happen. Thank you. Are there any, well, who would like to move this item? I will. Who would like to second? Councillor Foley. Are there any questions? Question? Mayor Brown.
Same question as last time. I mean, there are no, when you go, you've got pages about the impact, the Maori impact statement, the local impact statement, the climate expectation, 3 lines on financial implications saying there are none. I find it hard to believe that what you're doing has no cost or implications financially to us. And I want to know what those implications are. If there are really no costs at all, and I find that very hard to believe as well. And then I see that you're going to talk to the government about this. Well, I don't know what you're going to say to them, but clearly we're going to be talking to the government about a city plan and a few other things. So I'd like to know what it is you're going to be saying to the government, because they're certainly going to be talking to me. You only have to listen to the radio. They're all promising to do it. So I want to know what are you going to say? What implications are you going to say? There's no financial implications in anything to do with old people around here or planning environment and whatever. I find that a bit hard to believe. So those are the questions. What are you going to say, and why are there really, really, really no financial implications, which is good news, because you're obviously working for nothing, so you're volunteers. That's good news. Thanks very much for volunteering. I'd like to thank that right now.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Mayor. In terms of what I would be talking to the government about, it's just on that particular point around the possibility of working together to coordinate the aged sector and whether there's a ability for them to assist with funding for that. So it would be a specific conversation perhaps with partners like the Office for Seniors or regional MSD in this area. And in terms of some of that work is happening through the flood response already with the community connector model. I've been advised that they will have a specific community connector for older people that they're creating at the moment, so it's just continuing to have those kind of discussions. In terms of cost, I think similar to the previous item, this is an existing strategy, so it's just discussing the cost of continuing to have the strategy rather than whether or not council will fund any services for older people through the LTP.
Well, that's better than what was written down, but in terms of just having a strategy, we've got 300 of them. If each one of them costs 150 grand with a couple of staff on it, or 200 grand even, like that, that's quickly $6 million. And so this is why we're asking these questions, because it was exposed to us yesterday, there's 300 emergency, we've got 300 unfunded strategies, and we probably have a climate change and a climate crisis. We've definitely got a financial one. So that's why I'm asking you. Don't feel picked on. It's just as a result of this, I ask everybody, we'll start getting financial implications treated a bit more seriously than what they are. That's right.
Through the chair, if I can respond, look, I absolutely appreciate your questions, and they're fair enough, and so we're not defensive about that at all. It's great, happy to answer those questions and understand where you're coming from. I think there's also an understanding too, for all of the work, particularly that my staff do, is that we're not all doing new strategies. Sometimes that's done, and there's no other cost to it in relation to that matter. But what part of our role is also is reviewing and analysing and monitoring and saying, well, are we getting the kind of right outcomes? So what you have here is an annual report to say, well, how are we doing? Whether that's as a council or across the sectors, it depends on the issues, and in this one, it's a bit of both. And are we getting the kind of outcomes that we want in Auckland? And if we're not, then how could we perhaps pivot? How could we use whether it's our resources, our money, our knowledge in a better way, in a more targeted way to get the outcomes that we want? So there's that kind of outcomes monitoring stuff also that is part of the role that we play, not just creating strategies and then kind of implementing them as well.
Well, that's a good answer, thank you. But I think I've got the point.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be answering this every time for the next 6 months, so.
Certainly don't. So we'll sort that out. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. My question's similar to the previous item as well. How have you or will you engage with the Seniors Advisory Panel on this work?
We're very fortunate to have 2 members of the Seniors Advisory Panel who have just come into the Ropu. So we have Professor Edwina Pio, who you saw earlier, and another member of the panel, Lee Featherston, who recently joined us. So we're really pleased to have their advice and expertise, and they've already taken a very active role and are supporting the planning of the age-friendly symposium and thinking about the areas of progress for 2024. Yeah.
Thank you. We have no more questions. Must have been an excellent report.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Liz, as well, for being there. And thank you for waiting too, Claire. We'll move to comments. I have no comments, so we'll move the recommendations. All in favour? Against? Yeah. Alrighty, we're going to go back to the beginning of the agenda to number 10, I think it is. Yep. Councillor Baker is going to move item 10, which is potential changes to the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land. Who would like to second? Councillor Darby. Thank you. And we've got Ryan. Thanks, Ryan.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Bradley from the Policy and Plans Department. I'm just here to talk about the changes that are proposed to the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land. I've got a short PowerPoint presentation. There it is. So first of all, before we get into it, I'll just quickly go over where the areas of highly productive land are in Auckland, so we know what we're talking about. This map here shows in green the areas that are the most productive. So everywhere in the whole country, in fact, has been given a rating between 1 and 8, 1 being the best, 8 being the worst in terms of its versatility for farming. So the darker green areas are the areas of LUC 1, and the red areas are the LUC 8 areas. So you can see most of it's around Pukekohe and also West Auckland, and the rest of it's scattered throughout rural Auckland. So this is the same map, just taking away everything except for LUC 1, 2 and 3. And LUC 1, 2 and 3 are what is considered as highly productive land when we're talking about the National Policy Statement. This map here is just, again, looking at that area of Auckland that is LUC 1, 2 and 3, but it's just looking at what's happened over the last 25 or more years, actually, since the original survey was done about the 1970s or 1980s. When it was done, there was about 126,000 hectares of LUC 1 to 3 across Auckland. There's been urban expansion since that time, so areas like Albany and so on that have come in have taken about 13% of that out of play. There's also been the future urban zone that's come in, which is this yellow area on the map. That's taken another 5%. And then the countryside living zone, which is areas which are subdivided down to 1 or 2 hectares, it's another 7%. So since the 1970s or 80s, we've lost about 25% of our highly productive land, and obviously prior to that, a lot of it was already lost as well in areas that had already been urbanised by the time they came to survey it. So in terms of what we have to do under the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land, in terms of implementing it, we have been given 3 years to produce maps of where highly productive land is in Auckland. So the maps that you were just looking at before are kind of the transitional maps, just using LUC 1, 2 and 3, but it's up to the council to go out and actually decide where these broad geographic areas of highly productive land are, and we need to put a plan change out and put them into the unitary plan. We have not yet started that. It's probably going to start next year, and in the interim there's a transitional definition of highly productive land, and that's in the unitary plan maps. If you go online you can see exactly where we're showing that transitional definition. That's anything that's zoned rural that is on LUC 1, 2 or 3. So we need to do that plan change to put it in the maps. In the interim we've got that transitional definition. That's really to stop the gold rush effect of people knowing that there is going to be some rule tightening coming up, and so they want to apply before that comes into play. So that's why that's there. And then once we've got the maps, and we've got another 3 years to change the text of the plan as well to make sure that that matches up with the national policy statement. Now, it came into effect in October last year. It already is affecting resource consents and plan changes. So any resource consents that have been lodged now need to have regard to the national policy statement, and any plan changes need to give effect to it. So it is actually already having an effect on those. So there's been a number of consents declined as well as plan changes declined because of the national policy statement. So in terms of the changes that they're proposing, I thought we'd just quickly go over the one section that they're proposing the changes to and show you what it says at the moment, and then we can see what the changes are. So the changes are to this bit around land use and development on highly productive land. So this part is not about subdivision, it's not about rezoning, it's just about land use activities. And so what it says is that you need to avoid inappropriate use or development on highly productive land. And avoid is a very strong word in planning in New Zealand, so that's basically directing you towards a no. And what it says is that the appropriate activities are land-based primary production, and then everything else is inappropriate and should be avoided unless it's on the list of exceptions. And that list of exceptions is there. I won't go through it in detail. That looks like it's a long list, but they're all quite specific, and it is hard if you had an activity to try to fit it into one of those exceptions unless it really is fits under it really neatly, which is unlikely. So the potential changes are to that section of the national policy statement around land use and the list of exceptions. So some of the stakeholders have raised some issues in terms of that list not being broad enough, wanting it to have more exceptions on it. The first one is around new infrastructure on highly productive land. So it already allows for existing infrastructure and maintenance of existing infrastructure expansion, but doesn't allow for new infrastructure. Now, it's important to note that most infrastructure is done by requiring authorities that can designate land, and so this change doesn't have that much of an effect on them. Really what it's aimed at is private developers of infrastructure that don't have the power to designate land. And really what it boils down to is this is aimed at solar farm operators. Solar farms have become quite popular in the last few years, and a lot of them want to locate in rural areas on flat land, which generally happens to also coincide with being highly productive land. So this is basically looking to allow for new infrastructure on highly productive land that really is a pathway for solar farms to be able to get consents to locate on highly productive land. The second change they want to make is to that list is to add another exception. This is for indoor primary production and hydroponic greenhouses. So those are activities that aren't land-based primary activities, so they don't rely on the soil of the site. So when we're talking about intensive farms, we're talking about piggeries, poultry farms and so on. And most greenhouses that are built these days don't actually rely on the soil of the site. They've got some other artificial growing media. So these don't actually have a route through that because they're not land-based primary production. They don't appear on that list of exceptions. There's no easy consenting route for those to get through. And so the feedback from growers is that these activities need to be on this highly productive land because they want to be close to the other supporting activities that help them, such as pack houses and so on. So basically, the Ministry for Environment is seeking feedback on these changes, and the idea is that the council would put in a submission. This agenda item doesn't have a draft submission, but we're looking to have some members delegated to sign off a submission, and it will be due by the end of the month. So happy to answer any questions on that. There's a bit more detail in the report around it, but I've just kind of covered it at a high level.
Thank you, Ryan. I've got 4 questions so far. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2, Ryan. Thanks, mate. That was a very good presentation, very concise. So the Rural Advisory Panel, have they given any opinion on this?
Yes. So we've been to the Rural Advisory Panel, sought some feedback. That's not included in the report because we didn't have it in time. But yes, we've got feedback from the Rural Advisory Panel, as well as we went out to all local boards, and in particular we went out to the Franklin, Rodney and Waiheke local boards, being the main rural boards, to get the feedback, and each of those will be providing feedback as well.
Okay. And will the Rural Advisory Panel provide feedback as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And the other question. So I'm not really in favour of adding in these new ones like the piggeries, poultry, solar farms, and for them to have easy access to it. I don't think it locks up. Once the concrete's down, the concrete pad's down, in my mind, Ryan, it's down. And you can't use the land. Who's going to dig it up? In the future. So, if I voted for this, are we just voting for approval for a submission, or is there a way that I can indicate if I vote against this? If I vote for it, I don't want to be voting to include those options in there. So I'm just reading your resolution that's been put forward with Chair's resolution. I can't see where the option there is, Angela, for me to say that I protest against those ones going in.
Yeah, my understanding is that we're just voting on a delegation here. We're not voting on the actual content of the submission. But I think there is recommendation C as well that does talk about the members of the committee will have the opportunity to provide input into the draft submission prior to its approval.
Yeah.
So through the chair, just to clarify, just because again the time frames, we are asking for a delegation, so we're not asking you to approve a particular viewpoint on these matters, but we are saying that there'll be a delegation, and you'll see some red in addition there. We'll delegate to approve that ultimately, but we will draft that up and put it out so you can have your direct feedback before the delegated group make their decision. So we're not asking for your views about the positions on those activities today.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I'm wrestling a bit with this because I agree we should put a submission in, but I don't know what our submission is going to say. And I would kind of like to know what our submission has to say. So my question is in 2 forms. I want to know, I know that you said you've spoken to the Rural Advisory Panel, but I haven't seen that feedback. And just to your very point, I'd like to, if we're putting a submission in something, I want to know what it says. So my questions are twofold. One, could we either go back to the Ministry of whatever it is, Ministry for Environment, and ask for a 3-day approval, noting that your next committee is the 2nd of November, so we could actually put it through that committee? Or could we bring the final submission to the governing body, which is the Thursday before, and at least see it and vote on it? Because respectfully, I think there might be a few interesting views around the table once we see what the submission is. So whilst I don't, I'm not unhappy with what we're doing, I just feel that as a governor, I want to know what we are actually saying. And I want to know how, and just because you send me something by email and I respond, I have no idea necessarily what everybody else, and then is there a vote around that, or is there just some discussion? So I think the process is just missing a step here, and 2 options.
So through the chair, of course, normally we would bring it exactly back to the committees, as you said. It was just the timeframes. If through the chair, the committee did want to make a decision on this like you would normally, in inverted commas, then I think either of those options would work. I suspect as staff we might appreciate the additional week if we ask for an extension to MFE to the 2nd of November as opposed to the GB on the 26th. But look, I'm in your hands. We can do that if that's the preference.
If it's okay, could you add a D then and see if we can do that? Because I think that's key for me. You know, it's a normal process for us, Madam Chair.
We can do that.
So we'll just work on this, but we'd effectively be removing B, yeah, that's fine.
I don't think the delegation is to write the proposal. I'm not unhappy about that, but once it's written, you know, I want to know what it says. So I could be, by delegating to these people, I could be making sure that the council submission goes to something completely contrary and have your concrete pads or whatever you don't want in it, and you won't have a say.
Yep, so
Yeah,
copy.
we'll work on some words. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
I've got a few comments. First off, the issue of highly productive land, and I raised this issue consistently during the unitary plan. What we've got around Pukekohe are a unique set of circumstances. So yes, you've got highly productive soils, they are elite soils, but they're also in a frost-free area that enables you to bring on crops earlier. They also have water, which is vital for most forms of agriculture, and in particular horticulture. They've got proximity to markets and transport routes. There is no other area in New Zealand that has what Pukekohe has. So it's not just highly productive. There's a set of circumstances that need to be explicit. The other context is the historical context around what's happened to our highly productive land. So the Rosebank Peninsula, which was a phenomenal area and had all of those characteristics, or a number of them, that's gone. It's been covered over with factories. Up in Rodney, you've got the, what's the name of it, Omaha Flats, Point Wells. Yeah, you know, that context, well, the question that's been addressed to us and the question that is in the agenda item is for a response and some information. So that's what I'm generating, okay? So the contextual situation needs to be put in there. Then the loss of elite soils through erosion and the like that is occurring across New Zealand also needs to be figured in. All of these things are entirely relevant. Energy. We don't have an energy strategy in New Zealand. We don't have an energy strategy in Auckland. We should have some context around what's happening around solar farms and wind and so on in Auckland, which presently we don't even have. So that is also an issue to raise. And certainly the precedent that would be set from just plastering areas of elite soils and the like with concrete and the like is just horrific. And I would further say, look at the context of what other cities do in this space, and many of them, and I'm thinking about cities in Europe that have a long history, are incredibly methodical around issues like this. In Norway, for example, if you want to do something on a bit of land, they've got the records probably going back 300, 400, 500, 600 years on all the crops that were growing on that land and the returns. So they've got a strong historical context around valuing their land. What work are we doing around this? So there's some suggestions that go to the question that's asked in the agenda item. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And I saw Ryan writing all of those points down. Thank you. Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you. I just have sort of three questions. One, the first is there's a number of exceptions that MFE have identified to this, and one of them, just if you can confirm for my understanding, one of those is Māori land. Yep. Okay, thank you. Second question is, where do cumulative effects sit in the weighting these sorts of decisions. So I'm mindful it takes 500 plus years for every inch of topsoil. So if you get it wrong, you're waiting a long time before you can grow anything in these areas. So I totally understand the practicalities of what's been asked here, but it's just around I guess that we're talking about a cumulative issue here. So it's a finite resource that shrinks, potentially chicken farm by chicken farm. I'm not trying to put a disaster scenario out there, but I'm just wanting to understand from the officer's point of view, the thinking around that, and that would form into the submission. And the last point is around, in addition to kind of emailing iwi, what other proactive steps have been done to reflect iwi feedback? I guess in the past, so I'm thinking of iwi management plans that already are out there. I'm thinking of evidence given to plan change hearings from the likes of Ngāti Tamaoho. You know, so rather than just a kind of blanket email, council should already have fairly good record of the sentiments of some of the rural iwi on the topic of elite soils. So that's probably another question. Is that part of your thinking, or if not, can it please be part of your thinking? So thank you. Oh, and sorry, the very last point. Sorry, this isn't a question, it's just a kind of comment. If the decision goes to the governing body that excludes the IMSB from having a voice on a matter that's of significance to Māori, which is the productivity of soils, it's an environmental issue. So, kia ora.
Yep, so in terms of the questions, yes, there is an exception for Māori land in that list, and it doesn't have any caveats with it. It's just if it qualifies, it's an exception, so it doesn't limit what can be done on that land. In terms of cumulative effects, those aren't really taken into account under this, so you're right that it could be, you know, chicken farm by chicken farm, it could be a lot, and so that's one of the things we need to understand before we put in our submission is how many chicken farms are there currently, how many are on the horizon, that sort of thing, as well as piggeries and glass houses and so on. So that's information that we need to gather for a possible submission. And yes, looking at past iwi management plans and evidence of plan change and so on, it's a great idea in terms of trying to get some feedback from iwi. I have had some feedback already from some iwi, but unlikely probably to get all of them feeding back. I guess I'd probably want to go back to the iwi before I put in those views, because they might have changed, because I can think of one example is plan change 73 in Waiuku, where the iwi were quite supportive of that plan change going on to highly productive land. So I'm not sure if that actually is their view on a whole, or if it was just specifically to that site and so on. So that's something probably, before we put some things in, we'd have to go back and check with the iwi. And yeah, the fourth point was just about the governing body and the IMSB. And that's something for this panel to talk about.
Before I go to Councillor Darby, I just want to check with Councillor Baker and Darby on the changes to the recommendations. What I've just spoken to Megan about is a pathway to get your feedback in, and Councillor Sayers and others to Ryan. Thank you. Councillor Darby?
Yeah, interesting viewpoints from the members. Councillor Sayers, I was quite impressed with your response there, so thank you. You know, we've got quite a strong history in leading this work, actually. It was the former committee, we prompted the current minister, actually, Minister Parker, to get cracking with this work. In fact, I think we had to write to him a couple of times, and it was very late coming, but it came out. Now there is a relook, but it's in two narrow areas. It's not the whole lot again. So I'm just taking this opportunity to give some feedback, because I think this is what Ryan's looking for, aren't you? So I think one of the things I always remind myself is that soil at a minimum takes around about 10,000 years to make, you know, through natural processes. And an excavator or a digger can take a swipe at it or a cut at it in about 30 seconds, and it's gone forever, because it's not the same soil. It's just not. And anybody in the growing business knows that natural soils are like gold, and high quality soils are like lithium gold. So I guess I'm concerned about our possible response here. One is, I don't think this is just a rural response. I think the rural sector might have an interest. They are the hosts of this great soil, but the urban sector are the consumers of the food that comes from these great soils, be they 1, 2s or 3s. So I think we need to balance this up and make sure that we hear the urban view and the rural view. That's the first point that I would make. I have grave concerns about grade 1, 2, 3 soils being colonised by infrastructure that is cool for today, and it's really important infrastructure like voltaics, solar arrays, wind farms. There might be others. And yes, we need them for very important outcomes to address climate. But we have to be very careful. We just don't give them a pathway into creating another climate problem, which is sustaining the people of this nation and our city by growing food in real soils. So I've got a real concern about that infrastructure relaxation, and I've got a real concern about any possible relaxation on intensive farming where you lay a slab down or multiple slabs, be it poultry farm, piggery, rotary, dairy, and the list goes on. I'm sure there's a lot of other things. So I am interested in seeing the draft, and I think Ryan is looking for a bit of a steer as to how that draft might be written up at the moment, but I am of the view that we should be protectionists of these great soils and not allow easy inroads to destroy them. They're destroyed forever, and boy, have we destroyed the food producing soils around Tamaki Makaurau in a shocking way. So if you treat this like an absolute treasure that it is, because there's so little of it, I think we should be on the very conservative side in our response. Sorry, I needed to give my feedback there.
No, that's okay, and I'll take it as a comment. Christina Darby, Mayor Brown.
Thank you for that. I do have a question, believe it or not. Well, 2 or 3, but I'm with the very conservative view here. You know, I don't think we can afford to lose any more. It annoys me to see houses on bloody land where you can grow kumaras. What about already zoned land, future urban? Is some of this already highly productive land, 1, 2, 3, is already zoned as future urban? How do we stop that becoming another bloody subdivision?
So the National Policy Statement only allows rural zoned land to be considered as highly productive land. So even if it's got LUC 1, 2 or 3, if the zone over top of it is urban or future urban or countryside living, it can't be considered highly productive land under that National Policy Statement. So the only way we could do that would be to rezone future urban land back to rural.
Any thoughts about doing that?
I think that's what you might be talking about next meeting at the Future Development Strategy.
So the Future Development Strategy could hold a key to that, and that's obviously been delayed through to whenever, next meeting. So there could be opportunity there. I think it's a good point though, so we will just do a little bit of work on understanding that amount, just so that you can understand it when you put your submission in, but it may mean some additional decisions or work more specifically if you've got concerns about the amount of future urban in this area.
Okay, we'll try not to be too influenced by Fletchers there, those people who get rung them. Doesn't waste the time with me. What is it possible, because I'm a great supporter of keeping as much of this land as we can. There is another place in New Zealand where your veggies are all going to come from if we don't do that, and it's called Kaitaia. But they won't be quite so cheap or fresh. Is there any thought of rating relief on such land such as this? Because our rating policies kind of drive the guys to subdivide. And you know, if we rate them at a level which is pretty bloody high compared to what they're earning out of this, then it becomes really kind of, you can't blame the guy for thinking, oh, bloody hell, I'll give Fletcher's a ring. Not a good thing. And so I've often found that if you don't understand the commercial drivers, it's very hard to change things with regulation. Like I'm trying to change the behaviour on orange cones at the moment. When I asked AT how are they paid, no one at AT knew whether they're paid by cone or by metre or by day or by truck or anything. So so one of the commercial drivers, and I'm speaking this as a subdivider, who generally avoids good land, sometimes the rating policies drive you towards something which is not good for everybody. So can we put some thought into that? Is that a possibility?
Can I take that as a kind of request? I can't answer your question, but let us have a look at that. Thanks.
That'll do. That's a start. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, question?
Yeah, again, just a few other rapid comments to add to the mix that make this area unique that I should have remembered. Access to labour and varying types of labour, which is critical. The food security issue that Councillor Darby mentioned, incredibly important. We've had any number of submissions to us on that. The other thing is that around Pukekohe, you've got a whole ecosystem. So you've got the stuff that happens on the land, you've got the pack houses, you've got employment, and you've got towns and the like that have grown up around that. And what follows from that are the social issues. So I can tell you those solar farms, they employ 0 people once they are built. That's it. So you're talking about annihilating communities. So what does that do? What does that do to schools? What does it do to a place like Pukekohe and so on? So they are other issues that we should be factoring in. Thanks.
Yes, Councillor, I'll take that as a comment too. And Councillor Baker.
I've got a comment too, but it's really healthy and good and heartwarming to hear people concerned about Pukekohe and the soils. But I do urge a little bit of caution here in regards to it's not only man-made infrastructure that ruins our soil, it is the soil itself. And so there's actually a lot of soil in Pukekohe that has a thing called white rot, which means it's impossible to grow in that soil anymore. And so whilst it's really easy to come in and just say we need to be really conservative and we need to be this and this and this, we actually need to understand the science behind that and some of the things that drive the feelings of some of the growers down there who are the people that cherish and worship that soil the most. And so I just urge that when we do have a look at this, that we're not just coming at it from we're not ill-informed, but are not 100% informed view on it, and that we're not cutting our nose off to spite our face. And so just let's have a look, because I've seen the Rural Advisory Panel feedback and it might surprise some of you, and it will get out to you. As I say, it didn't make this because it didn't make the time slot, but this is from the industry who understand this better than anyone sitting around this table will ever understand it. So, and who have a vested interest in being able to use the soils and things as best they can. So let's inform ourselves before we rattle in with our very much appreciated, but sometimes often.
Thanks, Andy. So will you get those notes out to us? Sorry? Will you get those notes out to us? Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Oh, it's a comment, Chair. Should we come back to it, or do you want me to do it now?
No, I think we're in comments and we just will.
Oh, thank you, Chair. That's very kind. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Toe. Look, just a couple of quick points. I just want to acknowledge, particularly Councillor Darby, both for his kōrero on this, but also I remember last term we voted together on a lot of this stuff in terms of elite soils and their protection. And so, I just want to acknowledge your record on this, Councillor Darby, as well. So thank you for that. It might surprise you to think that, I think we need to be absolutist about this, right? If we touch a single blade of grass of soils that we desperately need, then we're moving into a climate impacted future where our kids are going to be impoverished and in a hungry place. You know, this is the backbone of our economy as a city and as actually a country. It's nationally significant. We're going to obviously need solar farms and places to put them as well, right? But, you know, we need these soils 100% of the time. So whenever we talk about this stuff, and I'm always banging on about compact city approaches and building housing close to jobs, and I've made the same speech 100 times in this place, well, this is part of the picture, right? Is that I'm really concerned about our use of soils and the farmlands that are so important. It's going to give us the jobs that we need. It's going to give us the food that we need. And it's going to allow us to trade with our international partners. So let's be really absolutist and really strong on this. I really support B. I can't wait for it to all come back and have a bit of a proper korero about it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina, can you phrase your question as a comment?
Yeah, no, I was only thinking about our staff members still there, Chair. That's why I wanted the part-time first. I won't be making any comments, but only because our staff members still here. So that's why. So look, I'll ask the question, and well, no, I won't ask it of you, but I'm assuming that he's free to go.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Brian. He was writing
I've actually got
notes.
the next item as well, so I'll stay around.
Yeah, no, I just with our standing orders, that's all. Sorry. So
was taking
Chair,
good notes.
it is a question, but it's a question of clarification to Megan. Megan, in regards to B, because for me, I'm into the process. So with B, I'm assuming that you are confident in regards to getting that extension.
Yeah, look, yes, I am. No, I haven't asked for it, and clearly it's not my decision. So, you know, saying that, I am sure that I will be able to get that extension because I will just go to wherever I need to get it. So it's fine.
So subsequent, is that, what if you don't? What process will we then have in place? So then we don't have to come back to here to say, sorry, I didn't get the extension. We have to have an extraordinary meeting. So what process, or what can we put in this recommendation so we know the process is very clear? One, we're asking for the extension. Hopefully we get it, but I want to make sure and cover that if we don't, in the event it doesn't happen. That's all. Kilda.
So no, look, you're quite right. I heard Member Ashby's comment, though, around the governing body as another option, of course, because that doesn't require an extension. And that, of course, is open to you, but Member Ashby's comment is very relevant to that. The worst thing is that we would be, 3 days late in putting up. So if we didn't get an extension, it was due on the 30th or 31st, whatever date it was, we'd be 3 days late. And if MFE can't deal with that, well, there's some bigger issues, you know? So, I think it'll be fine.
She'll be right. She'll be right. Thank you. Last speaker is Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciated my comments, the comments of Councillor Baker around this white rot and type of stuff like that, but I understand from Auckland Council's planning staff that they can actually isolate any of those areas that may currently be within the maps of the highly productive areas and isolate them out so they don't actually fall within the definition of highly productive land. So I guess my comment, Madam Chair, would be that, once highly productive land has concrete pads on it, it's effectively lost forever. And regardless if it happens to be a solar farm, a poultry farm, a glass house or piggery, those soils are lost for growing purposes. So my feedback through you is that it's vital that the Auckland Council submission ensures that those lands, those highly productive lands, are not built upon with further concrete pads. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, that's everybody. So we'll...
Just got a question. Sorry.
Sure.
And can I just pass it to Ryan? There's the question of white rot's been raised. We're talking about 10,000-year-old soils. White rot lasts for 20 or 30 years, apparently. Can we just double check the science? If there is part of our organisation or a submission coming in saying, oh no, white rot soils, that can be concreted over, it needs to be questioned, but it needs to be a scientific response. It can't be just anecdotal, please.
Through the chair, I hear that. Thank you. Sorry, Mayor, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, Kerikeri dealt with this issue some time ago. Phytophthora is in quite a lot of soils up there, which does prevent certain growth, but not a growth of all horticultural products. And so there is, it doesn't rule it out. It means that it rules out some products there. And in the 25 years since this has become an issue, the treatments have arrived so that some of the ones that couldn't grow in Phytophthora soils can. And so it's something to be thought about, but the solution isn't to cover it in houses. The solution is to consider alternative products.
What I'd like to do, Councillor Darby, is to find a pathway between you and the other councillors and Ryan, so we can get all of that nutted out in the submission. I'd like to put this to the vote. All in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you. Ryan, would you like to come back for item 11? Councillors Watson and Walker, did you want to move and second the Warkworth North? Oh, not yours? Or would you still like to? Councillor Sayers? A seconder, please. I'll second. Thanks, Ryan.
I second it.
This is just a procedural item, essentially. So this relates to Plan Change 25 in Warkworth. So it was originally an area of 99 hectares of future urban zone land to be rezoned for residential, business and so on. Nearly all that rezoning was made operative in October 2021. So all we're talking about here now is that little red area to the north. So originally it was that area outlined in red. We're just talking about one site, which is a 4 hectare site in the north. And there was an appeal that went to the Environment Court on that. The landowner wanted to have a mixed use zoning. The council wanted it to be general business, and that was based on this area being identified as an employment area for Warkworth. And the court sided with the council and gave it a general business zoning. And there's been no appeal, so we're basically at the stage now where we can make that plan change operative.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions?
Look, if Councillor says you want to move it, yeah. I'm happy to second. I just really want to commend our planning teams and our legal teams for resolving this in the direction that was originally recommended. So thank you very much. Please pass that through to both legal and your planning peers.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? I'd like to move the item. I've moved it already. Take a vote. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Ryan. Item 12, David is here for the grants. Councillor Filipona, would you like to move? Councillor Foley, would you like to second? Thank you, Dave.
Kia ora koutou, ko David McIntosh tokuna, Senior Advisor for Events with Regional Services and Strategy.
Sorry, can you just move the mic a bit closer just for our people online?
Okay.
Thank you.
And I've got Angela Clark, who's Acting GM for Regional Services and Strategy. I'll just got a presentation to quickly go through on the grants round. So just overall, this grants round is a 600,000 a year. It's traditionally been pre-COVID. It was handled in two rounds a year. Was split 400,000 in the first and 200 in the second. That was to enable just different timings for events. It suited them better to have applications submitted at different times. Just go through our decision-making process. There's 4 stages to this. I guess the first element is that the application should meet the regional criteria as opposed to being primarily local. So that's largely in terms of the scale and numbers of people attending, and also the reach being across the region. Sometimes that might mean smaller events where it's a niche sort of activity, but does actually attract a regional audience. The second element of it is assessment against our the criteria from the events policy, and that's in the appendix to this report. It's got there's 9 components to that, and we assess each application and give it an overall score. Then once we've done that, we consider the fit for the application for our sort of portfolio, and we have some particular areas of focus. In particular, responding to diversity in the community in sort of multiple terms. Also, there's a little priority for Māori events and events for youth. The final stage of it is when we look at the sort of level of grant funding that we might apply to a particular application, and once we determine that it's one we think we should support, and that's largely depends on I guess relativity with existing events we fund. We try and keep them fairly well aligned in terms of the level. Plus, also we're limited in terms of our budget capacity to increase amounts or take further grants on. One of the issues that we've got is the amount we allocate versus the amount that applicants request. Generally, we find that even with grant applicants that are coming in for subsequent occasions, they will be asking for more in the hope that we'll find something for them. We do provide a limited sort of amount of funding to the events we support. On average, it's only 13% of their overall event costs. That's for the round we're looking at this time. Our aim is to provide some continuity in funding to the events that helps them with certainty of their planning annually, rather than making wholesale changes to who we're supporting each year. That does have the issue that it reduces our capacity to increase or support additional events. Those requests for increased funding can come from multiple reasons, primarily increased costs. There's always a desire for event organisers to grow their events, and sometimes it's loss of other funding from grants or sponsorship. The fundamental problem, though, for us is that if we increase the funding to someone, potentially that would imply cutting someone else's funding that we've previously supported. In this round, we're recommending grants to 21 applications. 18 of them are ones we've funded previously. The 3 new ones are EcoFest, which is, I think it's the second year of their sort of bringing the different eco events together across the region. So we consider that to be useful to support, because there are those costs that come from trying to coordinate those activities, which are harder to get funding from other sources sometimes. Also, I think recognise that these festival type events across the region actually have some significant benefits because of the bringing together a large number of smaller events under an umbrella. That's where you get that bring in that sort of real community support for the events because they're smaller individually, but at the same time the festival of multiple events has that real impact and draws the audiences. We have the same sort of situation with our Culture Fest, the Auckland Council event, and World of Cultures, and the Heritage Festival is another example of that, where we put in a modest amount of money and get quite a bit of return on, community activity. The second one is Kaumana Harvest Festival. That's a smaller event which is focused on sustainable food systems. It's quite unique in the region, and they're just looking to restart their event this year after being sort of out of action since 2019 due to COVID. So it's this, it's a unique sort of event, and it's a modest amount of money there. The third one is Manu Moana, which is Songs of the Pacific. That's delivered by the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, and it's being performed in Wellington. It's a concert, and it's there's a number of requests that came from the Pacifica communities to have that come to Auckland. They're really focused on trying to keep down the price of tickets. They're also prioritising the release of tickets to that to the Pacifica community groups in the first instance. That's a one-off, so it's actually it works quite well. We have a portion of the fund that we generally look for one-off events to fund so that we can rotate a bit annually. So there's a couple of, all those, majority of those were funded at the level that they've received previously. The one exception is ASB Polyfest, where they received $100,000 last year. That was an increase from the $75,000 the two preceding years due to the conflict with Te Matatini and the need to hold the Māori stage on a different dates to the other stages. So that increased their costs substantially, so we provided an additional amount. So we're sort of reverting back to their previous level. Just a note on the Farmers Santa Parade, their funding they received through the grants, around a $17,000 grant, which is the same as their grant last year. There's also a dedicated budget line for them that is inflation adjusted each year, and that's at $49,000. It's non-contestable. So they've got about, the total of those two numbers is their funding that they'll get this year. In terms of the events that we've recommended to be declined, that's 17 of the 38 applications. I've just summarised the key reasons, and generally it's because of their scale, smaller scale events. We're going to do a bit of work to try and engage with applicants earlier to discuss their event and ensure that it's going into the right scheme, really. There are a few other types of situations, some where they are more aligned with, say, arts and culture funding, and better to stay in that funding area, and others are sort of out of scope for our regional scheme. So I think that's main points there, and just happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. We've got two questions for you, one from Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I've just got a question about the NZSO funding, because it's quite significant. It's one of the highest funded in this round. They are a direct competitor to our Auckland Philharmonic Orchestra. They are funded by central government, unlike us. And I'm just interested why we are putting our money towards the NZSO when our APO does a lot of work in this space and for our Pacifica community. And we haven't potentially gone to some of our partners who support NZSO, for example, Go Media, the Herald, Listener and whatever, to get that sponsorship first. It just irks me that we struggle to fund our own orchestra, and here are we putting up 25k to our Wellington-based National Orchestra, whose mandate it is to tour New Zealand anyway, not funded by us, but funded by central government. So why are we doing that?
It's, I guess, primarily the content and a sort of to support the keeping the ticket prices down, making it more accessible to the Pacifica communities.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you haven't grabbed me around the fact that our APO won't provide that service, or we could get it sponsored in a different way. It's just, do you know what I mean? We have enough trouble funding our own, and it's 25,000. If you look at the list of money going for others, it's one of the highest. I mean, I think, look, you're talking to me here. Orchestras, love them, you know, and opportunities for people to listen and be part of that experience, fantastic. But we're giving it to our competitor here, and if APO didn't do anything for Pacifica in music, fine, but they do, quite considerably. So I'm just struggling with that one. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Good point, Councillor. You don't have to answer that. You can take the feedback away. Member Henry.
You're right. Can I just ask how many of the applications were made by Māori? And out of those, how many were funded? What's the sort of percentage?
I think there's only the two events with a core Māori focus in this round. I don't think any of the declined ones were from Māori or had that real focus. So that's...
So there were no Māori declined?
No, I don't believe...
Sorry?
No, I don't believe so.
So they were all funded?
I think the ones that have got a Māori focus were funded in this round.
So how many was that?
It's two.
Out of?
Out of the...
18, something like that?
Yeah.
Did I say?
So I think there's a... in the report, there's a table we've produced. It shows the that's in paragraph 54. So that shows both the amount, the proportion of our funding that has gone to those events, plus the number of events. So historically there's generally been about, say, between 7 and 9 events annually. Pre-COVID, you'd see on that table that there's been 3 events in the first round, and the majority have come through.
So that's the Wakaama and the Polyfest?
Yeah. Those are the two.
There's another one, those two, and then the other list, the other list is the ones that have declined. None of those that I've had a look at are Māori applicants.
Yeah.
They're the ones that have been declined, the ones that I don't think is Māori.
Yeah. Yeah. So historically, we've had a larger number come through in the second round.
Yeah.
And
they'll all get funded.
Yeah. I think there haven't been. I'm trying to think of Māori events that have been declined. Certainly it's an area that we're keen to to get more applicants. One area of focus there would be matariki events now. We're keen to get some coming through there to add to that occasion.
So who decides?
Besides, it's really, we largely responding to applications.
Yeah, who decides yes or no?
So we have the applications go through an assessment, and this round we had, there's 3 staff that assessed it against the priorities and give that scoring, and then we consider them against those other that fit with the portfolio, make sure they are regional and not a local board event. And as I say, I think there hasn't, apart from, I think there might have been some small activities that weren't events that were normally in scope for our regional funding that were Māori-led. But I think all the other events of regional scale, I think we've supported. So it's definitely an area we're keen to ensure that we maintain that level of, historically it's been, I think we're funding about around 20% of the value of the round has gone to events with a Māori focus, led by Māori.
Thanks, David. Last question, Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair, and tēnā kōrua to you both. If you have a look at chart 1 on page 44 of Nexus on our report, that chart there has the local board spread plus regional. I just wanted to get some clarification and say that when I looked at it, it had Central had round 1, 11 events and 12, but that just indicates where the applicant is holding the event. I just wanted to get that clarified. It's, it's not, that's why they're there, for example, and Member Henare mentioned, I think you mentioned to Member Henare, for example, the Waiheke International Jazz, for example, that's been held over there, but it's in the local board area. So it's, that's the reason why the numbers A. It's not because South Auckland local boards are missing out, because they're all regional events. That's the clarification.
Yeah, I think it's really the nature of the larger events are more likely to cluster around the centre of the region to give equal access to their audiences or attendees.
And the last part I've here, Mana Chair, is the 196. So that's the next round, round 2. And that's going to be focused on, I think, Māori, focused on youth. Can you just clarify that second round, the funding, where the target is?
We had, in the past, sort of identified it as a round focused in that way, and the assessment criteria was actually adjusted to give added weight. We tended, sort of during the COVID period and subsequently, is to retain that actual weighting, and you see in the it notes there that the 9 sort of elements of their scoring. At the bottom there's the focus on Māori and youth events. So that's coming through every time now, but we just haven't identified the rounds as having that priority.
Yeah, that's the grant assessment criteria that you're referring to with those 9. Kia ora, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Before we move to comments, can I just check the room and see how you would feel about removing the NZSO 25,000?
Chair, look, just this is from my perspective, I think, and again, we always go back to process. And I mean, although what the Deputy Mayor is saying in the light of it, I'm assuming that that would have been done in regards to the criteria. And that's the only reason why it was a wee bit different with the regional sports around that process. And the reason I say that is because I read the application, the full application in regards to what I supported and didn't go against, and went against the officer's recommendation, because I read the full application of that particular one in Howick or Pakuranga. So I read the full application. So that's why this here for me, I'm supporting, and that's the only reason from my perspective.
That's all good,
Kia ora.
all good, thank you. Are there any comments? Comment? Councillor, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair. I had one more question for the staff after hearing Councillor Filipaina's kōrero. Is that okay if I ask? Yeah, just a question on the NZ New Zealand Symphony Orchestra application, because I'm quite keen to fund it if possible. Putting aside the fact that we've also got the APO and putting that as a competitor aside, did they meet the criteria, all of the criteria for the funding? And is that why, are you able to speak to that recommendation?
Yes, they do. The event does meet the criteria, and I think in terms of the particular elements there are probably the scale of the event and the I guess it's celebration of Pacifica music in that context. It's sort of it's something quite different. Those were sort of the key things there, and also that there was that act of addressing that access to the Pacifica communities. They were doing a lot to achieve that.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We're on to comments. Oh, question, yep.
So I'm just trying to find the criteria. I haven't managed to find them yet. But would I be correct in saying that the issue that Councillor Simpson, the Deputy Mayor, has raised around priority around events that are Auckland-based rather than national-based, and the opportunity for an organisation to get other funding, and that might be funding from government or the like, would that sort of thing rate as a criteria, or does it follow that we need to widen our criteria?
Yeah, I suppose it's part of it comes back to the aspect of with funding activities like this is that they think generally sourcing funds from a range of grant providers or sponsors, and often the scale of the activity and the what you get out of it will depend on the level of funding that you receive. And so I think that's where we take into account what other funding is there, but in some examples like this, it is a case of being able to provide some support to the event, which is likely to lead to that more favourable ticket prices and their the work that they do to deliver that event to those communities. So it's sort of I don't.
Thank you. Right, we're on to, is that a question or, oh, yeah.
So is it fair to say that the NZSO one is actually more about access for a part of the Auckland community to something that they're offering, as opposed to funding what might be perceived as a competitor? So it's actually about part of Auckland's community being able to access their offering. Is that fair? I don't. Well, you can ask that if you want, but that's my question.
Yeah, I think that is a big component of it. It's that because we don't see it's the the orchestra isn't making a profit out of the activity. It's I guess we're providing support for an orchestra that's not based in Auckland, but it's, as I said before, I guess our primary focus was on the relatively unique nature of the event, and and also that there had been I guess, request from Pacific communities for it to be held in Auckland.
So they're not coming anyway?
So,
This is specifically. Sorry.
Before anyone else speaks, I need to move an extension of time until the end of the agenda. Second by Councillor Henderson. Thank you. Right. Councillor Ferry, did you get your question answered? No more questions?
Just one thing I often, you'll hear me say at the end of every grants decision, is just to make sure that the Auckland Council is acknowledged as a funder on all the collateral that goes out. I just repeatedly see the absence of that. I'm not saying in your area, but it's just too regular, Chair, that we don't, I know that our public money is invested, but I don't see the acknowledgement of it. And so that's just in all the collateral and promoting, be it website, print, ticketing, I think we should be reminding Aucklanders that their money is actually invested in the event. So if we can have eyes on that, please. Thank you.
I think we're in comments. Comment?
Just a
Councillor
bit,
Simpson
sorry,
first.
I
Just wanted to
can
check
close
if
the
it's-
debate because I know that the Deputy Mayor wants to comment.
Just briefly, I appreciate process. I think that's really important. I suppose for me, the NZSO was funded to nationally tour. They are funded to come to Auckland by somebody else. And if we wanted a generous ticket price for something that they were going to provide in our city, I think we should have requested that from them as part of their national planning. I think they do an outstanding job, and I think the fact that your community can have, the South Auckland community can have a cheaper access to a wonderful orchestra is fantastic. It's just in my heart that the APO, I know, does a huge outreach to the same community, and it just irks me that we're giving money to what I would call a competing orchestra when we have a designated orchestra to deliver whatever is required for our city. So I just feel in my heart I need to say that. But both orchestras are outstanding, and I think they both do a great job.
Thank you. And to close, Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Acknowledge the staff, but there's one thing, please, can you take back to your director? And I think within your staff, and my suggestion is, please have a look at the criteria that we have here, because when I see alignment with Māori priority, alignment with youth priority having an 8, and then I have a look at other consideration as outlined in the policy, that's a 12. I'm just sort of saying we need to just to have a look at it. If it stays the same way as the discussion, I don't want to bring it to a workshop. I just really want our staff just to have a look at it and whether the weightings are correct. And apart from that, Chair, fully support. Kia ora.
Right, thank you so much. Thank you, David and Angela. And we'll take a vote on this. All in favour? Against? Against the whole lot? Just a no. Okay, thank you. Right, item 13, Stephen Bell and Taryn Crew on the approval of seasonal closures of vehicle access to Murai Beach. Moved by Councillor Walker, second by Councillor Henderson. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having us today. I'm going to hand over to Stephen Bell, who is our Senior Advisor, Principal Advisor in Regional Parks, and he'll take us through the recommendations for today and a bit of a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Taryn. Kia ora, Madam Chair, councillors and members of the committee. Stephen Bell's my name. I work for the Regional Parks team. I'll here to present to you and ask for the committee's approval to approve the seasonal closure of vehicle access to Te Onioni Rangatira Muriwai Beach for the next 3 years over the New Year period, and for Guy Fawkes also for the next 3 years. We have a very short PowerPoint presentation, after which we can hopefully take the agenda item as read and answer any questions you may have. Muriwai Beach is a very, very popular, one of two beaches in the Auckland region which vehicles regularly drive on, the second being Kariatahi in the south, in the Franklin area. The information you're looking at present is the number of vehicle movements onto and off Muriwai Beach over the last couple of years. Now, you know, for every vehicle that drives onto the beach, it drives off again, so you're looking at vehicle movements. 80% of the vehicle traffic onto the beach has been traditionally through the Muriwai Regional Park, through Coast Road, and around about 20% of the traffic has been through Wilson Road and Rimmer Road when it was open. Rimmer Road has been closed for some time now, so the only two access points are Coast Road and Wilson Road. You can see the impact of COVID, the level 4 restrictions in there, and also you can see the impact of the seasonal closures from previous years. Traditionally, we've taken an educative approach to trying to encourage better driver behaviour, environmental stewardship, and environmental responsibilities on Muriwai Beach. The clearance signage clearly indicating where vehicles are permitted to drive and where they are not permitted to drive is at both entry points. And we've also enjoyed the support of four-wheel drive clubs who chipped in and basically paid for a trailer-mounted sign to encourage people driving onto the beach into basically where they can and can't drive and what their responsibilities were. We also have a pamphlet which is regularly produced, which covers the obligations or expectations of drivers, reinforces the areas they can and cannot drive, and stresses rules around fires, illegal camping, or camping, or the fact that camping is not permitted in the area, and other responsibilities. In a recent we also have recently obtained some information from the New Zealand Fire Service, because fire in Muriwai is a significant risk, and it's one of the reasons why we seek the restricted vehicle access to the beach. Now, this is information from Fire and Emergency New Zealand for fires reported to them over the last 20 years. You'll see they've had 361 fires reported. 73% of the fires reported to them have been in and around the edges of, around the edges of Woodhill Forest, not in the forest proper. The big concern is the regional park and the dune system has very flammable fine leaf vegetation on the windward side of a 12,000 hectare standing pine forest, which is owned by Ngā Whakahio Kaipara Development Trust. So fire is a very significant risk, and as you can see from the information and the charts attached, that actually there's a big cluster of activity around the main entry points onto the beach. Environmental impacts on the beach. There are ongoing impacts to the dune system and the beach proper. The way we try to manage those, in addition to the education, is we have rangers patrolling the beach. Our staff resource is very, very limited. And when you consider in a weekend we may have one staff member other than summer when we have two, trying to ensure that the message is getting through to what can be in excess of 1,000 vehicles travelling on that beach on a day. It can be a very fraught and challenging sort of exercise for them. We have an increasing level of locals concerned about the behaviour, the negative behaviour of drivers on the beach, particularly driving in areas which are prohibited. And a review of incidents recorded on the beach show really there's little change to the overall driver behaviour on the beach over time. We have an ongoing issue with fires, as I've said before, dangerous and reckless driving of motor vehicles, vehicles driving in prohibited areas, illegal hunting, illegal camping, and some of the driving behaviour has resulted in serious vehicle crashes. Not sure what happened to that one. This is just a couple of photographs of the visual impacts of vehicles on the beach. And often with the beach, people will talk about when the tide comes in, generally the impact of vehicles is healed. There's still some more research required around it, but I'm pretty sure the Tohero would have a slightly different view of the impact of vehicles because they drive up the intertidal zone, and I think certainly there's a lot of speculation that vehicles do significant damage to that part of the environment. The pictures you're looking at there are Wilson Road, top left, is just vehicle volumes at Wilson Road. The middle image is again vehicles at the Wilson Road end, which is about 30 kilometres north of the Coast Road access point. The bottom left is the outcomes from poor driving, and the image to the right is a blue penguin trying to cross the beach through all the vehicle tyre tracks to get to some point of refuge in the dune system. Just so you know, the penguin did actually make it that day, although the next morning there was a tyre track about half a metre away from where it was resting. So in summary, our recommendations are we're asking the committee to approve the seasonal closures for the New Year period over 3 years. Dates are there. Also asking you to approve the closure of the vehicle access to the beach over the Guy Fawkes period, being from the date of commencement of sale of fireworks to the Monday following Guy Fawkes Day. So this year that would be from Thursday the 2nd through to Monday the 6th. Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Stephen, and we'll go for questions. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you for this. Look, if it all went pear-shaped and the closures didn't work or there was a lot of pushback or whatever, you're locking us in for 3 years. Will there be a review period as part of that? I mean, will you actually have a look and see, you know, is it working well? Is everyone happy? Or
If I may, through you, Madam Chair, we do, when we close the beach, we put some significant physical barriers in place. From time to time, those barriers are, and they have been put in place for the last 3 years over the New Year period. So this is a continuation of what has happened for 3 years. From time to time, those barriers are removed, and some very enterprising four-wheel drivers, we do try to repair them and get them resecured.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yes, I wish to speak in support in principle, but also I'd like to make some additional comments.
Councillor Lee, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're in questions. Shall I put you down for comments?
Please put me down.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. So I see in the PACE committee resolution that was for the 3 year previous, there was no mention of closure there. The closures that you've had over Christmases for the last 3 years have been implemented by yourselves under your own initiative. You're now asking us to formalise those by resolution, correct?
No, sorry, incorrect. The first year the beach was closed as an operational decision. The second year, being 21-22 and 22-23, were closed by resolution of the PACE committee.
Not the resolution connected to our presentation today, is that right? I've got it here in front of me. I can't see the word closure in it anywhere.
Previous resolution from the PACE committee was actually they resolved to close the beach for 22-23, and again prior to that 21-22.
Okay, move on. So the joint agency Muriwai Management Group, that's basically the establishment, correct? Police, fire, parks.
And other organisations that have an interest in managing Muriwai.
Listed here, yeah, thanks. The community advisory group, that's?
Made up of members of the Wilson Road community, the Muriwai community, and members of the four-wheel drive community.
So there's you don't mention there the 3 public meetings. I saw no mention in the presentation about the 3 public meetings, which were standing room only, at 3 halls in the area. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, they were referenced in a report to the PACE Committee at the end of their last term. So no, not referenced in this report.
Thank you. The Surf Lifesaving Club, they were referenced in the last one, were they? They weren't. They were kind of neutral on the whole situation.
Through Madam Chair, the Surf Lifesaving Club is invited to the joint agency meetings. They have been unable to attend many of them, and they are kept in touch with the outcomes from those meetings.
There was a Stuff article though with them in 21 that where they said they didn't give support. I have the article here.
Through Madam Chair, that's correct. A member of the Muriwai Surf Lifesaving Club voiced a personal opinion, which was subsequently retracted by the surf club, I believe.
The boat launching area will still be open, and boats and trailers or trailers and the towing vehicles will be allowed to park on the beach still?
As at this point in time, the southern end of Moriwai, being Maratara Road, is the subject of a corridor access restriction because of landslip and land instability on the hillside to the south of it. Our intention is for the boat launching arrangement to be re-established so people can launch and retrieve, members of the fishing club can launch and retrieve their vessels from that southern end, as they have done for the last 21 years.
And so there are people with permits to go on the beach, primarily the four-wheel drive club?
Through Madam Chair, currently a permit to drive on either Muriwai or Kariatahi Beach is a free permit that you obtain via an online system. As at my last look, which was a couple of weeks ago, there was around about 4,300 permits issued to drive on Muriwai.
So is that similar to just booking yourself a site at a campground or something like that, that the public can go into it and just...
Yeah, correct, without the payment at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Wind carts, they are still allowed on the beach?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Well done. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Thanks for your work. Just a question about the period. In 21, I think it started on the 24th and went to mid-January from memory. I guess my question is, if it's about safety of people and then safety of property being, the landscape, the iwi forest, etc. Have you given consideration to that period actually starting the 24th of December as it started in 21, or as it was in year 2021, and extending through that, high use period, which extends right through to anniversary weekend and then even into Waitangi Day, which next year is on the Tuesday, and as we know, many people take that Monday. Have you given consideration to that high use period? That's the first question. And the second is, NIWA are predicting a very dry summer coming up, and that with that are westerly winds. And that's exactly what you're describing as the big risk up there in terms of fire. So have you factored that into your recommendations? 2 questions there, thanks.
Through Madam Chair, yes, in relation to your first question. When we first closed Te Onioni and Rangatira to vehicles, we closed it for a period of Christmas Eve through to about mid-January. As a result of feedback and reviewing that, we subsequently changed that and sought the permission from the PACE Committee to close it from prior to New Year, being the more celebratory time of year, to enable families to access the beach and picnic over the Christmas period. With respect to your second question on fire, in 2022, we extended the closure period at the request of Fire Emergency New Zealand because the fire level had reached an extreme point. We would do so again. We tend not to come back to the committee for that approval. Fire and Emergency New Zealand simply tell us that they need it closed because of extreme fire risk, and we close it.
Okay, so this recommendation is running for a period of potentially 3 years. So within that, you have the power to respond if fire risk arises. But within that, do you have the power to respond if personal safety risk arises? Like if there are some incidents and you get a read on it and go, actually, I need to make a different decision here. Do you have the power to do that, as you do for fire?
Through Madam Chair, less so. That is something that we would have to do some research on and come back to the committee for.
Member Ashby.
Kia ora. Thank you. Good to see you, Stephen. Just a quick one from me. Ngāti Whātua, and in fact Kaura as well, but Ngāti Whātua is the lead there. I understand in previous engagements have supported the last lot of previous temporary closures. But could you speak to my understanding of Ngāti Whātua's position in the past has been for a more fulsome closure or regulation of, 4,000 cars hooning up and down past there, running over penguins and setting fire to their forest. There's a bit of an issue, I imagine. Can you speak to that?
I can speak to the feedback I've had from them, but I cannot speak to it because that is a matter that Ngā Maunga Whaki o Kaipara would have to speak to. The conversations that I've had with and the involvement from Ngā Maunga Whaki o Kaipara Ngāhere Limited, being the forest, entirely in support of not only seasonal closure but a much more fulsome restriction of vehicle access to the beach. Previously, Ngā Maunga Whaki has, during a bylaw review in the 2018-ish, expressed an opinion around whether vehicles should be able to access the beach at all. They did step back from that. That said, I received some information, or actually confirmation, from Ngā Maunga Whaki o Kaipara Development Trust this morning and from Rewati Marae that they were both in support of the temporary closures as per the resolution.
Thank you.
Councillor Ferry.
Kia ora, thank you. This all seems very sensible to me. One concern I do have is around the enforcement and what that might mean for staff in particular, and members of the community who are trying to point out to people, hey, you can't do this. And this is probably a question that might be a little bit more in Taryn's space. You've given us great information, thank you. What are we doing as an organisation to make sure that people are supported in those circumstances? Yeah, thinking about the wellbeing team's work and things like that.
Well, thank you for the question. Through the Chair, Stephen might be able to give a little bit more detail because having previously been the Western Sector's Principal Ranger, he's definitely got all the detail. But it is something that we assess, and it's the reason we bring in additional summer rangers as well over that period, acknowledging that it is a difficult issue for them to deal with, but we do bring in additional staff during that time period, I should say, where we see the number of vehicles increase significantly. I don't know if Stephen wants to add anything further.
If I can, through you, Madam Chair, the staff are, we try to ensure that the staff are encouraged that if they feel that there is a risk of confrontation, and in that environment there is often some people with vastly different opinions on what they should and shouldn't be able to do, that they will step back. The tools that we have in our toolbox to be able to meaningfully do anything from an enforcement or compliance perspective are very poor. We have support from the police as far as they are able to within the resourcing they have. They provide 2 staff, or this year I think they're planning to provide 2 staff. Previously they provided 1, committed to solely look at the moriwai safety of vehicles on beaches issue out there, and they will issue infringement notices as they are able to. But the beach is 45 to 60 kilometres long. It has limited communication coverage and can be very isolating.
Thank you. Follow up for that then, and sorry Stephen, I didn't mean to imply that you wouldn't know the answer. I was more trying to put it on Taryn as a yeah. With the enforcement, and you mentioned the police can give infringement notices, are our staff able to give infringement notices? Is there any ability to enforce, via licence plate number or anything like that? I'm just wondering, Madam Chair, if this is one of those things that needs to go on our list for discussing with central government in that in that fine space. So, yeah, how does that work?
Through you, Madam Chair, at the moment, not well. The Auckland Transport and Auckland Council are having a look at our respective traffic bylaws to get some more consistency there. At the moment, the vehicles on beaches is controlled by the Public Safety and Nuisance Bylaw. There is no infringibility to that. But there is a set of actions which have been identified that will hopefully provide a few more tools in the toolbox. We'll take one over the none that we have at the moment. And then clearly police have the authority to stop and issue infringement notices for breach of traffic regulations.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of questions, Stephen, and I'm a little bit resident about supporting the full recommendation. So I'll just go through those questions first and just hear what you have to say before I make up my mind, all right? So because it's quite, first of all, I really want to acknowledge you and you taking me out in the car, going down the beach, having a good look at the situation. Also, our community meetings that we've had there in Wilson Road, residents and things like that, just marvellous work that you're doing out there, and I know it's appreciated and I appreciate it. Those gates, you know how we've funded, we're going to have fund some gates that are, I think we put $1 million thereabout, right? So to control access eventually with a paid permit to go through that gate, when will that be? Is it? I think it's within the next year or so. I'm asking this question in terms of reference of the 3-year timeline that we're looking here in A. When will that gate be in place? Roughly, yeah.
To the best of my knowledge, through you, Madam Chair, maybe 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
That is subject to a lot of variability, of course, but that's to the best of my knowledge.
All right. Okay. So, yes, yeah. So, again, just passing something 3 years out, we might have the gate in there that could change behaviour through a quota system or some other way of limiting access. Just one of the things that thoughts going on in my mind, right? The Guy Fawkes, right, coming in, because this caught me a little bit on the hop in terms of the clause about the Guy Fawkes coming in. I know that it's been pushed, you explained in your presentation, your report, why that's in there and who's advocated for that, and I can see the reasoning behind it, right? I guess my concern around it is we haven't, this is quite controversial, you know, out there, and it wasn't in the original public consultation document that we went out to and had all the meetings, and Councillor Turner's referred to 3 of them that were standing room only, and suddenly Guy Fawkes pops into the equation here, and I'm nervous to support this in the fact that it's gone to some of those interest groups, but it hasn't gone to wider public consultation. So I don't know if there's a question in there or not, mate, but it just worries me that we haven't gone to full public consultation. So give it an opportunity to respond. Can you explain, perhaps, would it be normal to go to public consultation, or why we haven't gone to full public consultation, and should we go to consultation before putting something like this in? Now, is it a bit early? Do we need to go through that process first?
Through you, Madam Chair, Guy Fawkes was tabled as a risk period by the organisations that have to deal with the consequences of Guy Fawkes. In regional parks, we have the benefit of dealing with the aftermath, but many of the organisations that are part, police and fire and emergency, have to deal with the real thing at the time. Certainly now Maunga Whakahi or Kaipara Ngāhere Limited have a high degree of anxiety around Guy Fawkes. Particularly with the El Nino weather pattern, drying conditions, and particularly dry forest. Previously in 2021, as referenced by Councillor Turner, an operational decision was made to close vehicle access to the beach, and so on the face of it I would say no, we wouldn't have to go to public consultation as a matter of practice, but that may be something that we revisit next year. Or at some stage in the near future.
Thank you for your response. I don't know if I'd be more comfortable if we had of, right? And final question is probably around the Rodney Local Board and their input into it, because I understand that they were split on, had to use the casting vote of the chair on it. So can you just confirm my understanding? Is that correct? I haven't looked up those minutes, but I understand that was the situation.
Through you, Madam Chair, correct. Yes, it was an even vote with the chair throwing the casting vote in favour.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Last
I'll just
question.
reserve my right for comments if I
Last
may.
question before comments. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, can you confirm, and kia ora Taryn as well, sorry. Can you confirm that in September of 21, the PACE committee ended up getting an item around closing Te Oneone Rangatira Muriwai Beach for the season? Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can.
And you also confirmed that in the 22nd of September 2022, there was an item on the agenda for future of management of motorised vehicles on Te Oneone Rangatira Muriwai. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can.
Can you also confirm that part of the context in that report, that there were very valid concerns from the community? One, beach user safety and enjoyment, environmental protection and fire risk, and dangerous, reckless driving behaviour. Can you confirm that those risks are still present today?
Through Madam Chair, yes, they are.
Can you also confirm that around that particular item, there was a decision? I've got the minutes here, but I won't read those out. But there was a decision, one, to end up investigating a gate being placed over there in regards to the future management of motorised vehicles, and also there was going to be a seasonal closure as well.
That is correct.
And two more very quick questions, Chair. Can you also tell me that with some of the meetings that we had around that particular item, not around the closure but the future, is that with some of the meetings that have been tabled here, is that some of our staff were abused in regards to some of the people who attended that particular meeting, some of those meetings?
Yes, the meetings were of sufficient interest to make the lead item on one news.
And also that the editor for the four-wheel drive, I think, magazine was supportive in regards to the agenda item, and also commented in the magazine around the behaviour of some people who attended those meetings.
That is correct.
And the last one for me is that for us to make sure that we minimise the risks that have been identified, that the closures that you have in this report is the best way for us to minimise those risks.
Through you, Madam Chair, with the removal of vehicles during the period of time that the vehicles are removed from the beach, the risk is minimised. It does not go away because people can still walk, albeit at a much lesser distance. There is certainly a view that those closure periods are insufficient, expressed by some members of the public, and what we are asking for is in effect a decision to close vehicle access to the beach for 6% of the year.
Right, I just read the report again and just want to confirm that the local board, albeit a very close decision, the local board's recommendation was to support the item that we now have in front of us.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Just one quick one. Checks on the speed limits. There's, I think, 20k, 30k, 60 zone, north of Coast Road. What monitoring has been undertaken, and what have you learned of compliance with those speed limits?
Through you, Madam Chair, the speed limits are 30 kilometres an hour on Coast Road until you get to the beach, and then 30 kilometres an hour to 650 metres past the four-wheel drive access, which in effect is the stream. Beyond the stream, it is a 60 kilometre hour speed limit, although that does restrict around the Wilson Road access point. Anecdotal information would have vehicle speeds on West Coast beaches in excess of 100 kilometres an hour quite frequently.
Thank you. We're going to move to comments. I'll ask you both to move away, but before you do, Stephen, thank you so much for the years and years of work that you've put into this and for fronting those public meetings, and, but importantly working with all the stakeholders. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Comments, Councillor Lee, you're first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wish to support the recommendations. I must express sympathy for management, rangers being required to deal with this problem. It's a hard one. It's been around for years, and there's no easy answers. I hate to be in support of taking a kind of a killjoy approach, because I recognise there are two different views in regard to beaches. Most people would consider that cars should not be on beaches, and yet there are some beaches in the country where the custom has grown up over years, since the invention of the automobile, I guess, that you can drive on beaches. And Muriwai is one of those beaches. There's another aspect to this. The measures in the recommendations are there to control behaviour and to ensure safety on certain days. But in many respects, they're quite inadequate. But in the real world, achieving this is difficult enough. The reason why I believe the controls are inadequate is a factor that's not taken into consideration in making these decisions, and that relates to our responsibilities under the Resource Management Act and other statutes in regard to Indigenous fauna. And I'm not talking about the korora of the little penguins. I'm talking about what was considered a taonga, and not just by Māori, but obviously by Māori. A taonga, considered a taonga by all New Zealanders, and that is, Muriwai is one of those places which was the natural habitat of the tairoa. The tairoa was highly valued. In fact, it was an industry, a canning industry, because it was so sought after that it was commercially viable to actually can them and sell them. Tairoa soup was a luxury item. And right up to after World War II, every year the tairoa would turn up and people would go out and harvest them in the season. Harvested them so much that they went into decline. And despite closed seasons, I'm trying to make an important point here. Despite closed seasons, they remained in decline at Muriwai and other places. And there's a co-relationship between the decline of the tairoa and driving on the beach. And as I say, it's a co-relationship. As vehicles have got bigger and heavier and more of them, despite fisheries closed seasons, the tairoa have never come back as it should. And so the co-relationship is a very strong one, though not completely and not scientifically proven. And I believe it's a responsibility of this council to undertake research, to commission research into the reasons why the Toiroa in our region have not rejuvenated. And I'm pretty sure the answer lies with using Muriwai as a highway. And the point is, while we have the Toiroa is the cousin, about this big, is a cousin of the Pipi, first cousin of the Tuatua. But its behaviour is somewhat different from its cousins. The Toiroa lives high up the beach. It rests high up the beach. And because it's big, it's got a fragile shell, what makes it very vulnerable to vehicles. And so vehicles have not only impacted on the Toiroa through making it easier to poach them big time, but it is actually crushing and killing them. And therefore I would think it's a responsibility of this council under Part 6 of the Resource Management Act, for a start, all persons exercising functions under and powers under this Act have a responsibility to recognise and provide for the significant habitats of Indigenous fauna, that this council takes such measures to investigate the impact of motor vehicles on this taonga. And I'm not going to move an amendment at this stage, but I'm signalling it to Ms Tyler and Dr Weiss that they should make it a priority to consider engaging research or undertaking research, literature research and direct research to investigate this, because I believe it's our responsibility. I'll just make that point. So in addition to human health and safety, we should also be thinking about our responsibilities to the natural world when it comes to One Rangatira. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I speak on behalf of Megan, but we've got people taking notes on this, so we will come back about that research that you've requested. Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'll take my speaking opportunity to acknowledge Councillor Lee's comments there. They were very important comments, Mike, and I'm very pleased that you've made them, because I am sure that those Tairau were in the kill zone as well. And your point around the vehicles even getting heavier, more frequent, I'm sure that there is a direct correlation there, and why we're not seeing them come back. So I just want to endorse your comments there, sir. And I guess you know, it's just a seasonal ban of this quantum isn't going to solve the problem, and neither do I see that seasonal ban solving the problem of ongoing the other public safety risks and health and safety and public safety risks as well that exist there. I'm probably not going to support the motion itself, but I do want to acknowledge your comments there, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Yeah, thanks to the staff, and yeah, Councillor Lee, thanks for your comments there. It's really important to remember that the history of this incredible shellfish population, you know, that sustained Māori in that area from, you know, Dargaville Beach, Muriwai area for, you know, hundreds of years, and it became a commercial product. I won't go on about that, but there's three memories for me here. One is, as a young child, being taken every year from South Auckland, where I grew up, to Muriwai Beach to do the annual Taurua harvest every year. And I think it only lasted for probably about 5 years, but you know, it was a pilgrimage. And of course, I do remember going to the far end of the beach because there was nothing at the south end. The entry point was pretty much at the south end then. So you were travelling over this ground repeatedly, year after year, I guess, doing exactly what you were saying, annihilating the population until the population was only at the northern end, and then that was annihilated. There is another theory that I've heard from our colleague, or former colleague, Glenn Wilcox, on the possibility of the arrival of plantation radiata forestry and the change in the groundwaters that then arrive at the beach as well. But I agree with you, it does demand some ongoing research, because we seem to have forgotten that this shellfish is almost no longer, I don't think it's, you know, there's no longer the days where you get a shellfish like that. My second memory, and in terms of the speeds that were mentioned here, of 100 kilometres an hour on this beach, that's alarming. So my second memory is as a 17-year-old, I think, in my VW Beetle, going up the beach, being the wannabe surfer, couldn't do it really, riding on the front of my Beetle, of my friend driving, and coming off at about 30 kilometres an hour and hitting sand like it was concrete. The reason I came off is my colleague hit soft sand and the vehicle just did a big divert to the right and I went left. It is not a flat, hard road. There are soft parts on it as well, and you can deviate course quite quickly, and motorcyclists will tell you that, the car drivers. My third story is as the parent of a daughter. It's okay, Councillor Walker, I think you're disabled, you mentioned that before. We won't call you Councillor Walker then. So my third memory, thank you, Councillor Shane Henderson, he gave me that just after lunch.
Outrageous, Chris.
My third memory is taking my second daughter, who was a keen horse rider, to ride a horse there. And she would take her to Coast Road, horse float, get out, start riding, and she'd come back 2 hours later, hopefully. Except on one occasion, she took a while coming back because the horse went lame because a vehicle came really close to the horses and spooked the horses, and the horse went lame for a period. I actually think there's some ongoing issues here. You know, it's just a matter of time before we do not allow this to be the highway. It's the highway because we allowed it to be the highway to the Toiroa to begin with, in my eyes. I think that's possibly the history of driving on the beach, is to drive to the food. And the food is now gone. And I will be supporting these motions today, but I've actually been pretty vocal on this each time it's come back. And I think we are going to have to grapple with the issue for a range of reasons to go the whole way on this and actually institute a ban to driving vehicles on Muriwai Beach.
Thanks, Councillor Darby. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. This is unworkable and divisive. You know, we've got a 50-kilometre beach. Who are we going to keep off? Not the people that were at the meetings that were rude and nasty and horrible. They're not going to be kept off. We're going to keep off the 90% of Kiwis, the good, compliant people who want to drive there and enjoy the beach and have a day out. You know, we're going to stop the grandmas and the grandpas taking the family and the toddlers up somewhere and having a sit and a picnic in somewhere quiet. You know, we've listened this morning, all this morning, about young people and our society feeling disconnected, not connected to council, not voting, not engaging with us. No, that's because when they go to the beach, they see a $1 million gate with surveillance. As they look over the gate, they see the four-wheel drive club with a permit and the blow carts with a permit driving off into the distance while they're left sitting there thinking, feeling disengaged, disrespected, and with no life. You know, we have memories. I'd like them to have the chance for memories too. In the prime holiday period, yeah, I understand some of the environmental issues, but a short closure, as Councillor Sayers pointed out, isn't going to save Tauiroa. A closure of a portion of the beach further up permanently might do. But, you know, over the prime holiday period, when a lot of those families have got, you know, that time off and they just want to, they get out there, they probably haven't even found they can go online and need to get a permit, and it goes on. We have alternatives to a gate and surveillance and locking people out. We have a parks ranger service. You know, the psyche in the human, in people's minds about park rangers, kids who watch Smokey the Bear on telly, is the policeman of the wilderness. We could get our park rangers back out there and doing their job properly. This, as you pointed out, Councillor Darby, is actually the beginning of the end. Closure by 1,000 little closures. You know, we're losing our Kiwi way of life, and we don't need to lock everybody out in order to get change. We need to engage and work with them, and then as a result, they'll engage with us. And we might fix a lot of this morning's complaints as well as this afternoon's. I want to see the same management as the Parks Department has been practicing for the last 3 years continue. And I think it had results. Not completely, but nothing will. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
I just have a side conversation, so I'm not speaking. Have you got on with the amendment, Mike?
Would it be acceptable for me to put up an amendment seeking management to commission some research into this? The question I raised, I'd ask Ms. Tyler.
I'm sorry, Councillor Lee, but it should have happened in your last speaking turn, so we're unable to do that now.
That was a question, though, on Mike's part.
He was the first speaker.
In which case...
Because what I would like to do, because I hear what Councillor Turner is saying, and I understand the difficulties of the situation. I've been familiar with the area for 30 years in a councillor role. The thing is, are our decisions legible and easily explained to the public? If there was research to suggest negative environmental
Councillor
impacts,
Lee, you've had
then...
your speaking turn, I'm sorry. Councillor Walker.
Sure. So I'll just put an amendment by way of addition before I speak, Madam Chair, and I'm sure I have the support of the seconder. And the amendment goes like this: that officers be asked to commission research into the impacts of motor vehicles on Muriwai Beach, on the Tauiroa, and there's the Latin Daffy's venticosa, close brackets, population.
Madam Chair, just a point of order.
Councillor Walker.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Point of order.
Point of order. Just a point of order. And that's just in terms of, I haven't got my standing orders in front of me, but I'll just take some advice if you need a number. But I'm just wondering in terms of relevance of that. I know the research is being undertaken separately, it's been indicated to you by the staff, and that seems, I agree with it, and I can see the intent of the amendment, but just in terms of standing orders, is it appropriate to put in here? I think it confuses the issue, because some of us might want to vote against this, and suddenly we're voting against something that we might support.
Yes, I agree with you. And the other point that I would make is that we shouldn't be commissioning any work right now. We should be waiting until our long-term plan. I think it's something that can go back to Megan. I was considering maybe it's some work that Remo could do, but it absolutely needs to come through our long-term plan discussions. We can't keep commissioning work to be done when we've got no money.
There may not be any money involved on our part. There are a number of agencies that could be engaged here, Madam Chair. So there's an amendment that's been put up.
Yeah, we'll get it done, bro. Just wait. We'll get it done. There's no need to hurry. Just we'll do this shit.
Thank you, Member Henry, for your contribution.
I was really asking for direction, whether it's within standing orders.
Just
Standing
gonna
orders
take some
seem to have
advice.
become more restrictive in recent years, but anyway.
This is a bit like those
Madam
packed
Chair,
meetings, Steve.
if I may, I'd like to speak to the point of order by way of clarification.
Happy to hear from you, Councillor Fletcher.
Councillor Walker. Yes, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. By way of clarification, when the draft regional management parks management plan went through last year, there were a great number of submissions, as you may recall, and having been involved in that work, along with then Councillor Linda Cooper, there was quite a bit of work already undertaken on this issue. You've heard the complications today around bylaws and the need to get changes from within government, and this applies not just to Muriwai but also to Kiriotahi. I think that the work has probably already been undertaken, and maybe it's a matter that could come before another committee meeting of the Planning Committee, bringing back some of that research. At the time, the officer, Mr. Bell, gave great advice, and we had Mace Ward also provide great advice. I've still got all my files on this that I could provide to the committee, but it's not commissioning a fresh piece of work as such. It's something that I think is already in existence, but it is a controversial issue, and the Four Wheel Drive Association and many others have made submissions, but there is quite a serious environmental impact on Muriwai, and I think it would be informative for councillors to have, and members of the IMSB, to have access to the information that came through by way of submissions and officers' report.
Thank you, Councillor. We have an amendment. So,
Hang on, sorry.
hold on one moment.
Sorry, just to clarify, members of the committee, so Councillor Walker moved the original motion and we don't have a mover for this item. You can't move an amendment if you've already moved the item. So is anyone else?
Actually, was me that really moved it, but he went and read it. So anyway, so you put me down. Is that okay?
And you'd already spoken, Councillor Lee, so thank you, Councillor Watson.
It's very restrictive if we're going to have a decent debate here to pull those rules like that.
Point of order. Point of order, Madam Chair.
Point of order.
I need to come back because I didn't really get an
You didn't
answer
get
on
an
my
answer to
point
your
of
point of order.
And I've had a chance to get my folder out.
good. It's
So
handy.
I will refer to this point of order being relevant to section 1.7.2, subsection C, and irrelevance. Irrelevance is the topic being discussed is not a matter currently before the meeting. And so I see this amendment as not being a topic, and so we just need a ruling on that. If the advice is in favour, the amendment should be removed.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers, yes, I do rule that it is out of order, and so the amendment will be declined. Thank you.
Contest that, Madam
So,
Chair?
Councillor Walker, do you want to finish your speaking turn?
Sure. And you're very fortunate that I didn't move a concern around tedious and repetitious speaking. But anyway, I didn't do that.
You're giving it a good go.
So I thoroughly endorse the sentiments and the information that Councillor Lee spoke to around the Tauiroa. I'd suggest that we're on good account from the officers around the impact of vehicles on fauna and flora and the like, especially fauna. They spoke to that directly. So I think it is absolutely relevant. I'm disappointed with this view, and there is some urgency around this. And I know that my iwi friends across the table there are certainly supportive in that regard. So let's hope we get some progress on this sooner rather than later, and no doubt our iwi friends will even put some money up to help support the research.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lee, I want to acknowledge you along with the other councillors, Councillor Lee, because the history that you gave is something that I personally didn't know, but that's not surprising when I hail from up north and the work that you have been involved with them. So I mihi to you and say thank you so much for that, because that gives me another insight in regards to why these recommendations should go through. They should, because you've just given me even more excuses. I've outlined with the pathway that I gave to our staff, to Steve and to Taryn, that the reasons why this is so important. It's around the safety. And for those that were here the last term, and I know that Councillor Turner wasn't here last term, but for those that were here that ended up sitting through the PowerPoint presentations that our community gave, as well as the local board chair from last term, Phelan Piri, who came here. You know, I need to acknowledge him because he's been pushing this along with the local board last term for so many years. And even with him as I think he's with the fire service voluntary as well. And, you know, his work that he's done for Te One One Rangatira Muriwai has been amazing. So I want to acknowledge him. I also want to acknowledge the local board this term. Whether it's one vote or whether it's 6 votes, the recommendation went through supporting these recommendations that came through to this committee. There's one thing that sort of got my back up a little bit, and there was some comments that was made around enforcement, and the comment was, you know, let's get the rangers for them to do the job. Let's get them doing their jobs properly. I want to tell those rangers that are out there, you are doing your jobs properly. Again, even last term, what had happened was there was indicated to the committee the abuse that you were all getting from people who were driving on Muriwai. The abuse for those, and also the pictures that we saw of some of the penguins, and also some of the environmental issues that we have canvassed all the way through. So you are doing your jobs properly. It's the community, and it's a very few. Councillor Turner's right. There's only a very few people that spoil it for the rest, but we have to take control and end up doing something that will affect our community. And the fact that there has been some, and Councillor Darby mentioned it, 100 Ks on that beach, that's disgusting. 100 kilometres on that beach. What happens to the safety of the people who are walking the beach? What happens to them? Oh, no, look, somebody might get injured, but that's okay. One is okay. But look, let the rest of those drive on Muriwai because they want to enjoy it. So definitely want to support it. And again, just mihi, ngā mihi ki a koe te rangatira Mike. Ngā mihi ki a koe, my mate. Kia ora nā, thank you.
Member Henare.
Oh yeah, look, totally support what's in front of me, but also the issue that Mike has raised about the whole toheroa issue. But here's the thing: come back tomorrow, bro, and you'll get support for it. But there's also another issue. And that's what Councillor Darby and a few others have raised. It is about time we pulled the pin on all the vehicles going up and down Muriwai. Now I know that there are some people who think that it's their Kiwi right to drive along on the highway of sand and pitch a tent. Yeah, we did that in 1965. You can't do it in 2023. And here's why. Because we know more than we did in 65. you know? And we want to be able to do something in 2065. Our mokos want to be able to go there and do what we did without a car in 1965. You know, it's all about progress, and it's all about looking after stuff for the young ones that come tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. You know, and if we don't, we do ourselves a disservice by not leaving stuff behind. You know, I've tasted toheroa, and I'd love a feed of them tonight as I watch my TV. But I know I can't. Well, I know I can't from here anyway. Maybe further north. The further north you go, there might be the odd one lying around somewhere in somebody's fridge. It's been there for 25 years. But like I say, so if we want to do something, do this today. Do what Councillor Lee and others are talking about tomorrow, and a week later, do what Councillor Darby has said. You know, let's put it all into a proper a line of attack. You know, we can invite the naysayers, but also, you know, let's do some work behind. And I tell you what, when Councillor Walker says his iwi mates will most probably be able to pay for it, that's not a bad idea. Why not get iwi involved in the whole process of looking at the degradation of Muriwai? You know, and I'm sure that there will be, if council comes to the party as well and other organisation as well, it might just be the catalyst that we all get together rather than just the council doing it on their own backs. Let's do it all together, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together.
Kia ora. Councillor Henderson.
Kia ora, really hard to follow that. I'll give it a try. Okay. Don't always need to speak, you're right, but no, I'll throw it in. Yeah, look, I'm really supportive of this. I think we've had some good yarns today about the problem broadly, and yeah, tautoko the call around trying to get some more advice and information and actually analyse the stuff that's already been done, which I think is quite extensive as well. Just want to shout out to the community in Muriwai, who are doing it really bloody tough, and all the other coastal communities in my ward. Muriwai is not, but we know the coasties out there that do a hell of a lot of work on environmental protection, a hell of a lot of work on things like search and rescue and helping people that get in trouble, which is all the time. I'm sure that community in Muriwai probably needs a bit of a break from all of that, and the more that we can do to help, the better. So we should probably look at this in a broader way. And just before I finish, just acknowledge Glenn Wilcox from last term, who did a hell of a lot of work in this as well. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Last speaker is Councillor Watson.
Try and make it a quick and typically telling contribution, Madam Chair, and just really I respect your decision you made in respect of Councillor Lee's attempted amendment via me. I would just say, to me, it seems perfectly relevant to the whole train of thought there or justification. So I probably could have done without the word commission. We have REMU. I'm sure this study's been done. I'm sure it's an exercise that could be done relatively quickly in-house without any cost, and that goes for a lot of other things besides this. So as far as the Chief of Strategy goes, I'm assuming, Megan, you'll be picking that up and coming back, I'm sure, the information that will already exist. So that's the only points I wanted to make.
Thanks, John. All right, that's everybody. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
An enthusiastic no, Madam Chair.
Anybody else? No. Thank you. A question for you. We can go through the rest of the agenda by not having presentations if you're comfortable, you've read your agenda and looked at the presentations, or we can come back on Tuesday. What's your preference?
I think we've all read our agendas. Hopefully we all have. I won't, yeah. But I'm comfortable, Angela.
Everyone is? Those online?
Yes, continue. All
Okay,
good.
thank you. I think we'll just press on. They've been getting a bit. Okay, we're up to item 14. Petra is going to come and speak to the item. Thanks, Petra. And Lauren.
Kia ora koutou. So this item is about the inquiry into climate adaptation that the Parliamentary Environment Committee has opened, and the item is just to ask for a delegation of to the Chair and the Deputy Chair and an IMSB member to approve Auckland Council's submission due to time constraints, with the submissions closing on the 1st of November.
Thanks, Petra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add to that, there was an earlier discussion around the highly productive land and the extension of time. This is slightly different because this is a select committee inquiry. So, and of course they're not sitting anymore, so they can't grant an extension. And of course we're not quite sure what would happen post government, but nonetheless. We think it is worth doing this. It's just not quite the same situation where we can ask for an extension. So hence, because of the timeframes, we're asking for that delegation. But just wanted to compare those two items today. Thanks.
I'm happy to move, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions?
And does that motion give the authority of the Chair and Deputy to appear in front of the Select Committee? Or we just assume that?
Sorry, Petra, do we know whether there'll be a hearing in the sense, because this is a discussion document, really, this is not a piece of legislation yet. It's kind of the pre, so I'm not sure there'll be hearings. So Petra will know.
Yes, we don't know yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any comments? Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Through the chair, yes, and B, we're saying that we will circulate the draft so you'll have an opportunity to read it and provide your feedback. And of course you can talk outside of that and whatever you need to do. Yep.
I'll put the item. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you, Petra and Lauren. Item 15, Biodiversity Credit System, another discussion document. Taryn and Dave.
Kia ora koutou. This item is about an initial discussion document from the Ministry for the Environment, which is exploring a biodiversity credit system, and we provided a draft submission on that document attached to the committee report. So today we're seeking approval of the draft and approval to a delegated authority to help us finalise the submission, ready for it to be submitted by the 3rd of November.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move.
Thank you. And a second. Councillor Filipaina, do we have any questions? Sorry, Mike.
There's a massive amount of pine forest being planted and exotics with really bad consequences. Will this help to counterbalance that?
Yes, that is one of the intentions of the government, that you'd be able to apply biodiversity credits and then funding to encourage native afforestation rather than...
Sure. So in respect of our submission, on the one hand, are we extolling the merits of biodiversity, but on the other hand, are we also indicating the impact of the opposite, which is effectively monoculture. Is that being covered off?
Perhaps I could just observe that the National Environmental Standards for Commercial Forestry just got gazetted in the last couple of days, and that actually gives councils more power to manage slash taken from forestry operations of a size of 10 centimetres diameter, and it has to be removed off-site by the operator. And so there's a lot of other regulatory tools now in place, and that's in direct response to the Tarawhiti situation in terms of the negative impacts on the community, the rural communities of that coast. So going back to kind of the nature of the biodiversity credit system is that, as Taran has indicated, it's there to try and support positive responses for biodiversity outcomes, and that will sort of hopefully marry up with some of the regulatory tools we have.
And in similar fashion, the council is able to feed in before it's concluded, Madam Chair.
You've got the submission, the draft submission in the agenda. How long has Councillor Walker got?
So I think we've got a timeline, Taran, but if there are particular views that people wish to come back to us with by the 20th, I think it was, 26th? 20th.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any comments? Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to move the recommendations. Sorry, already been moved. Put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Okay, now we've got Mary Louise coming to speak to us. Item 16 on Auckland Council Group Māori Outcomes Report. And Luann Valentine. Kia ora, thank you. Oh, Kieran, would you like to move it? Is she there? No. Oh, yeah. She's not there.
Yes, please.
Thank you. And a seconder. Ed. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou katoa. So we'd like to present Te Pūrongo Te Konihera o Tamaki Makaurau Ngā Huanga Māori, the Auckland Council Māori Outcomes Report for 22-23. This is the fifth such Māori Outcomes Report, which contributes to Council's understanding of our council group contribution while identifying areas for improvement and focus. So I won't go through the report in detail, but it does highlight several achievements through the year and some of our ongoing challenges as well. And first for this report, it does include the reporting against Kia ora Tamaki Makaurau measures. So you'll see that's been included. Happy to take any partai.
Thank you. And are there any partai? Any comments? No. I'll put the recommendations. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you both. Thanks for waiting all day. We've done 17 and 18. We'll move to summary of thank you, Councillor Walker. A seconder, Councillor Henderson. Item 21, there is no extraordinary... Oh, sorry. All in favour? Yes. Yeah. Item 21, considering there's no extraordinary business, and now we are going to move into confidential. Thank you. That was Walker Darby, and while we do that, if you'd like to go and have a quick break.